everybody. I'm just going to start a presentation then. Hello, everybody. My name is Gabriel. I would like to first start to thank the APS. It's really a pleasure to be here. I've had the opportunity to be on the other side, and it's actually quite cool to be here presenting today. I'm here joined with my colleague Alice, and we'll be talking about how to leverage NPS data from surveys to increase user engagement and ultimately to increase retention. I would like to first start by introducing our company. We're here on behalf of Feature. We're based in Berlin, and we have 75 employees. Those employees are really, we're proudly international. So we gather a team that is made out of 30 people from other countries. We speak 22 languages, and the company was created by two SoundCloud growth leads, Andy Carvel and Moritz Den. And we have been fortunate enough to work with a lot of big brands such as Adobe, Spotify, and Headspace. Nowadays, our areas of service are based in 4 areas, mostly growth and retention, ASO, growth and insights, and performance marketing. And today we're going to be focusing a little bit more in growth, retention, and mostly in NPS, and how the impact that we have driven from other clients. We're a growth consultancy that has won quite a bit of prizes as of now. We're really proud of them. We're not only proud of our past achievements, but we're also really looking forward to many more. Really ambitious bunch of people, and we have won in 2019 the App Marketing Agency Prize Award, and then also Outstanding Contribution and Best Retention Campaign. Here are some of the brands we have been fortunate enough to work with. These have been really great partners to work with us, and we have learned quite a bit from them. Hopefully we have been able to teach them a few things here and there, but we have here some examples of things that have worked with them, especially in NPS, and we would love to share that with you. But also, we didn't want to make this presentation super static. We wanted to make kind of a little bit conversational. So we would love to hear your feedback, your questions, your comments, to actually hear about you, because I know there are a lot of people here that work in CRM, a lot of people that work in product, a lot of people that are interested in feature. So we would love to hear about you in the comment section. So feel free to introduce yourselves. We'd love to hear about you. And it's a pleasure again to have you also with us today. And also, in that note, we wanted to ask you, what's one thing you would like to learn about this session today? Because we know NPS is something that can leverage a lot of engagement, but also a lot of people have their personal interest when it comes to the subject. So we really would like to know a little about your interests too. And if we can't answer all the questions right now, we're going to save some time by the end to answer some of the questions and get back to you. Okay, so going a little bit about myself, my name is Gabriel Batista. I'm originally from Brazil. I lived 10 years in Portugal, and my experience was mostly in management. I got into a little bit more of a techie career path when I joined L'Oreal, and I worked in e-commerce, and decided to just move to Berlin and to join Feature. And I've been really fortunate to have learned quite a lot about NPS and now be presenting a lot of the things that I have learned personally. So I'm just going to pass to my colleague, Alice.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alice. I'm also a growth consultant on the retention team at Feature. I'm originally from Scotland, but living and working in Berlin for the last couple of years, and I specialize in retention and engagement strategies.
Alrighty. Just pass here. So going a little bit into the subject. Here's our main perspective as Feature, the things that we do deliver when we get into to work with clients. Into in-apps, we have 3 main things that we do. It's core in-app messages. We design and make those in-apps really more intuitive and efficient. We do have custom templates to do upsell screens and in-app surveys. And now we're going to be focusing in one area that has shown to be really efficient in driving results, which is the NPS surveys bundle. And I'm going to go now into it. We're partners with Braze, and we're really happy to be partners with them. So we have designed this kind of platform in-house that allows us to do surveys that are compliant with Braze technologies. Excuse me, and we are really proud of the way it works. It works really fine, and We really do think it's not necessarily what you should replicate with Braze, of course, but being able to track results with any kind of CRM platform is key to our main idea that we're trying to showcase here, is to understand how to leverage that information, and it needs to be useful. So that's one of the ways that we do it, and we definitely advise to use this kind of technology, or any sort of technology that allows you to track this amount of information. Okay, we wanted to ask you as well, excuse me, what are the examples of user surveys you have used in the past? Because we have quite a big amount of people here. So we would like to know what have been your experience using user surveys, and how in the past you have managed to leverage this kind of information. So feel free to ask questions once again. And what blockers did you have? Because we do feel like learning from our mistakes is the best way to learn. And we do feel like a lot of our strategies have been built upon learnings and blockers. So we would like to know, what were the blockers in your experience working with surveys? So I'm just going to start by presenting a little bit of how to scope and deploy NPS surveys and campaigns. And this is not only why, but also a little bit what NPS is. I'm assuming a lot of people do know what NPS is, but in the case someone doesn't, this stands for Net Promoter Score surveys that measure user experience in a scale from 0 to 10. And it's really straightforward. It's the kind of survey that shows up and asks that basic question, how likely are you to recommend X, Y, and Z to a friend? But actually, within this basic question, there are a lot of strategic and really important information that you can get from it. And we divide it into 3 main areas that we think are really valuable for you to maintain and keep in mind when you're deploying this kind of campaign, which is first would be to churn prevention. So understanding, thanks to your detractors' feedback, and we're going to go into this a naming convention that we have a little further down the line. But understanding their feedback, understanding what makes their experience not so great, and then preventing them to churn is definitely something that you can get from this. The second would be, and it's a really truly actionable way of getting results, would be to increase the app rating by prompting the promoters, also a term that I'll further explain, to get the best results and to increase your app rating. And thirdly, it would be to identifying product problems. We have had experience working with international brands, so definitely localization issues when you have to translate something, or you have this kind of issues intrinsically in changing your user experience, are definitely a thing, and definitely a reality. So identifying those kind of problems are definitely one of the benefits from using NPS surveys. Okay. So we went from the why and the what, so now going to how. How do we calculate the score? Because Net Promoter Score is the score. And then we divide into 3 kinds of users, 3 categories. First would be promoters. Those are really the ones, the users that have loved your app. They are really the ones that are going to be spreading the word. In the scale of 0 to 10, those will be the 9s and the 10s. In your surveys, the ones that have answered, that would very likely refer your app to a friend or through word of mouth. The passives would be users that are within the 7 and 8 section. They're satisfied with your app. They're not necessarily going to shout about it and are super stoked about it. They like it, but at the same time, they're actionable. But at the same time, they're not as actionable as the promoters. And the idea here would be to then also move them to the promoter section. But I mean, then we have also detractors. Detractors would be users from 0 to 6, and therefore they're not indicating they're very happy with their product, and they would not be likely to give the best best feedback of your app. But then again, those are actionable too, and they give a lot of information. So we have here the score calculation. That would be the difference between promoters and detractors, and divided in a ratio with your total respondents. This would be a ratio that's pretty intuitive, but we give the difference between those two. And as big as it gets, the better. And then once it gets lower, then you have more detractors if you got to the point of having more detractors than promoters, it would even be negative, then you know you need to track, you need to understand there's a problem there and evaluate things. Now, we went from the why, the what, and the how. Now we're going to when. That's definitely a problem that we have identified with our clients. That has been when they have asked us quite a lot when to trigger this kind of campaign, this kind of survey. And that would be, we have two examples here. One example would be here, the fifth play. That would be, for example, with a music app. Doesn't necessarily need to be fifth play. Is fifth time user does a certain content, excuse me. And we do feel like having this approach to prioritize this kind of user that use the app 5 times is better than upon app open. What I mean by that is we do not want to be annoying. Annoyance is definitely something that you have to avoid when you're dealing with your users, but mostly when you're asking them to do a survey. As we all know, doing a survey is not necessarily something that excites a lot of people, but we would like to then have the best opportunity to get them to answer, but also to understand how can we get the best result without being biased, because we don't want them to just evaluate really bad because they're annoyed by something, or then to evaluate some really high because they have used the app 200 times. So I believe this example here translates really well what we try to aim, which is a user that has used the app enough and has clearly shown that he uses the app, but he's not definitely the most retained one to give unbiased results. Then we have here one of the examples of a campaign that has truly worked with us, that for Headspace. This in-app that was created by us also in-house. It's a multiple screen in-app. The first in-app page, that would be the one higher up, that would be the with a basic question: how likely are you to recommend Headspace, from 0 to 10? And what we did, we segmented then the users according to their response. What we did is we identified the detractors according to their ratings from 0 to 6, and then we put them into another page that would actually allow them to give an answer. That answer in open text actually was very helpful for us to understand most of the problems that the users actually felt during their experience, and actually act upon that. And that was clearly something that we've seen a lot of results, and a lot of actionable results actually. But then we also have identifying the promoters, identifying which promoters are more actionable, and that would be on the right. And we divided it into Android and iOS. What we did was for the users for Android, because it's more, Android is more flexible, if you say, we then transferred users that selected from 9 to 10, so they were clearly promoters, to invited them to rate the app in the Google Play Store. That was something that has shown really, really great results. And we actually feel like those users are more prone to do so, and to actually have the opportunity to do so, and incentivizing to do so. It's really, really great. So the results were fantastic there. And in the case of iOS, where we don't have that much flexibility, we actually have a deep link with a preset message that would say something, for example, here, this person, for example, me, Gabriel, thinks this app is so good, and recommend it to a friend. And that also was really good to increase reach, and has shown really great results. Also, I would like to highlight this, because this was clearly one of our learnings in our tests while doing this campaign. We do incentivize people to be creative and to do campaigns really in a way that will be more appealing to users. But one of the experiences we had, we created this slider, as you can see on the left, like, for example, Instagram, and we realized that people were really excited just to put all to the left and just to the right, sorry, and to give 10s. And even though it's fantastic to have a great evaluation, I'm not saying otherwise, I would love to have my app with 10s all the time. That's not the idea here. The idea here is to have the most unbiased result, and to have then an actionable set of instructions to actually then put into practice and improve your app. So even though that was really a nice idea that we had to kill it, and no problem killing this kind of idea and variant, because we saw that actually we didn't want to compromise the biasness and truthfulness of our campaigns. So we would definitely recommend something, for example, like here on the right. So I'm just going to pass it down to Alex.
Yeah, and here we've outlined one of the ways, or how you can actually collect the user responses from detractors and then pipe those responses back into your CRM tool. In this case, we're using Braze as an example. So if a user scores between 0 and 6 and they're considered a detractor, they would then be served with something that looks like this. It would be an open text field, and they can then give us more details about why they wouldn't recommend the app. And what you would do is, when you build the custom HTML in-app message for the open text field, you would actually just add a line of code in there that basically pipes the response as a custom attribute into Braze, and you can name that custom attribute whatever you want as well, which means that it's super easy to find in Braze and to be able to follow up. And another thing as well, sometimes you can get really overwhelmed with the sheer volume of responses, and particularly if they're free form, open text. Every kind of string value can be unique, which is also a little bit hard to categorize. So it's also helpful in some cases to follow up with some predefined answers that the users can also respond with, and sometimes you can combine these two, of course, as well. And on the right hand side here, we've just given you an example of how you would see that in Braze. So within Braze and the user profile, you can actually look to see what their custom attributes are, and the survey response would pop up under their profile. So yeah, we've just used an example here, getting motivated. And even more importantly, if you're then scoping campaigns, which we'll come to in a minute, to follow up with those users, you can actually follow up with both the freeform answers. So for example, we've got survey answer equals and then the string value, or if it's a predefined response that the user has given you, you can also follow up with those users, which is obviously a lot easier than following up with users that have the freeform text response as well. And then as a next step, we would recommend that once you have all of the full volume of responses that you were expecting, you can actually just download all of that data as a CSV export from Braze. And then as a next step, which is also a bit of a task in itself, you can actually perform some sentiment analysis to figure out, what the key kind of negative feedback is. And again, we'll go into more detail on that in a second. Great, and so now we're going to talk about how you can monitor the NPS scores over time, but also to communicate that with the relevant stakeholders in the organisation. So here we have an example of an NPS dashboard that we've built with Google Data Studio. It was actually my colleague Tessa who has kind of built and developed a version of this. And what we use it for is, first of all, to collect the data on NPS scores and monitor over time. I think that's a really important point to stress. You want to at some points you might have quite a high NPS score, but then perhaps there's like new feature releases or product updates, and you want to pay particular attention to overall user happiness at that point to see if there are any dips. As I said before, you can use this and share it around the organization so that everyone has visibility of what's going on at any point in time, which saves a lot of time, creating these manual reports that can sometimes be a headache. And what we recommend is that you break down your NPS scores by user segment or user cohort to get a better and more detailed snapshot of how the different types of users respond to the app. And we've got an example up here, which is language, but you can also break this down by country, by platform, age of the user, that kind of thing. And I'll give you some examples of that as well. And the purpose of this is really to uncover key insights about potential areas for improvement within the app. And that can include anything from localization to general bugs as well. Yeah, so let's talk about how to interpret the data collected and how to kind of divide that data based on the user cohorts as well. So first things first, I think, or what I would recommend is that you really separate free users from paying users. And the reason for this is because we don't want to inflate the snapshot of overall user satisfaction. What we can assume by paying users is that they're naturally likely to score higher in terms of happiness than free users, because they've already indicated that they like the product by the fact that they're paying for it. So in an ideal world, if you can even run 2 separate NPS surveys for this, that would be perfect. But if it's a case of you can only run the 1 survey, I think at least at the data analysis point, it would be good to separate those out. And some things to consider are that these users will also have very different expectations of the app. So paying users will, of course, expect a much higher quality and much more variation of content within the app as well. And, internally, your goals for these users will also be different. So, for example, we want to get free users to, get to that aha moment within the product, to understand the key value of the product as soon as possible, so that we can hopefully convert those users into paying users as soon as, as quickly and as fast as we can. And then for obviously the premium users, the goal really is to keep those users engaged and retained in the long term. So even, the follow-up strategies differ between those users as well. Excuse me. Yeah, and another thing that you want to do is maybe separate the responses by platform. So of course, I've given an example of iOS versus Android, but you could also add web in here as well. And some questions to ask yourself are, what are the key differences between these platforms? Does the product differ in any way? Are there different features for Android versus iOS? And the purpose of this is that, you can, when you separate this feedback out by platform, you can see if there's bugs. For example, if there's like a bug on the Android sign up page, you can actually hone in your focus there as well. And keep in mind, of course, that the demographic of these users is can sometimes be quite different. So it's often said that iOS users tend to be more affluent, and in some cases are slightly older than Android users in general as well. And of course, that can affect their perception of the product. Yeah, and then one other way that you can separate as well is by country and language. So similar to what we said previously, maybe there are key differences in the product between the countries. So for example, is certain content available to users in the UK, but maybe not to users in Germany? Again, how does that kind of affect overall user happiness and the user's perception of the product? And one thing that's super important that I think a lot of people miss is to keep in mind the differences between the kind of cultures and the markets in general, and how your product or service might be perceived by a particular market where your product might be in its kind of early stages of adoption. So a really good example of that is Headspace. Obviously, mindfulness and meditation is quite a well-received and well-adopted concept in somewhere like California, but for other markets, that meditation in particular might still be something that's quite new to the market. So that's also something that you want to keep in mind in terms of overall happiness and scores there as well. And another thing that you can use this feedback for is to determine if there are localization issues within the app. And I would encourage you not just to think about the copy within the app, or even like your CRM comms, but also think about the content itself. Even like nuances such as it's paying attention to design details. So for example, some colors are a huge no-go in certain countries, and they can mean different things or represent different things as well. So all of that detail can really be pulled from these NPS responses as well. Yeah, and finally, another way to look at it is by lifecycle stage and session count. So for really old or users that have been habitual users for a long time, another question to ask yourself is, well, how has the core product changed since the older users first downloaded the app? Has there been new features that have been adopted since then? And in that case, you know, has maybe the use case even differed slightly for newer users that are coming in? And is it another thing that, you know, you can also gain insight from through the survey responses is, you know, is it possible that older users are on an even older version of the app? And in which case, you know, the strategy would then be, well, how do we get these older users onto, you know, to actually get into the app or Google Play stores and re-download the newest version of the app, so that we can avoid them seeing, you know, past bugs and things like that, which have been fixed with new releases.
Alrighty, so I think I'll be taking over here. Okay, so now that we talked about all these subjects, I would like to also engage in talking about how to leverage those responses that you get from surveys and to follow up in a CRM campaign. But also, I would like to ask you as well the question, how are you following up with your user base and their feedback? Also, don't forget to comment in the comment section below. And that's how we usually do it with our clients. We would normally have, after results come in of any survey, any campaign that we were launching, we would have a brainstorming session where we would have taken into account all the answers and all the cohorts that Alice said, and all the differences between users, and then formulate a lot of campaign ideas and ideas that we can make it actionable. But then, because we know how a process of brainstorm happens, so a lot of ideas are not actionable, but the ones that are actionable, we do put here in the backlog. And we would recommend the platform that we do use, which is Airtable, which is similar to for example, an Excel sheet that is really intuitive, and it changes with time, and it's possible for you to make sure that you can control, monitor, and collaborate with your team. It's a really good way of making sure that all the campaigns are there, the campaigns ideas, and making sure that you keep track of the process of those ideas throughout time. Also, when you do make campaigns like this and you put them into a backlog, a problem that we have seen throughout time was how to prioritize. For that, we would recommend using a framework. That would be any framework of your choice to actually prioritize, but we have made one in-house, which is the RRF, excuse me, framework, that which stands for reach, relevance, and frequency to determine impact. That would mean that we would create then 3 columns, one for reach, one for relevance, and then frequency, and then read together with our team, scope campaigns in such a way that we would give scores from 0 to 5 according to each one of these criteria. Once we have those scores set up, we then multiply them and then define the impact and then use it here. As you can see, we have a prioritization in our backlog. We would have, here is an example in a Google Sheet of having that all the ideas there, all the descriptions there, everything really in a very singular way that you can put your business goals, have really visibility across all the campaigns and make it actionable, because that's something we also felt with our clients, which was the difficulty to make the answers from those surveys actionable. Here's an example of how that would look like. That would be and a kind of message, and then by the right you have there the score, and then what we would do is then sort it by any ways, and then make it so we can know which ideas to prioritize first to make them actionable. Also, one thing we also wanted to include in our framework, which is the resource. Resource could be development, design, budget, and most importantly, time. And that we also think it could be separate from the score. So the total score could be actually there, and then the resources are really high. So you would need a lot of resources to allocate. Then it's not a quick fix. But then once we implemented resources to our clients, we have easily identified a lot of quick fixes and quick wins, and have resulted in really good results and overall retention and engagement.
Yeah, and here we just have some information about other things that we can do with InApp Messages. So, for example, my colleague Alex has built our custom InApp studio, which is called Belayer. This is something that I'm particularly kind of proud to have on the team. And it's basically a kind of InApp studio that teams can use to build all sorts of InApp messages without having technical or coding knowledge. So it's really, really awesome product. And then we can also build custom templates for your team as well. So, you know, if you've got an idea for a survey that you want designed, you know, or even like an upsell screen or something, that's something that is one of the things that we can do in-house. And then of course, we do offer NPS as a service as well. So I've just got some information about, you know, how you can kind of use NPS and to collect your survey responses, and you know the time frame, which would be about a 2-week turnaround time as well. Yeah, and of course we also offer full retention services, and this can be anything from, you know, general onboarding, setup and optimization to monetization, and you know focusing on you know upsell improvements in general as well. Yeah, and if you're interested in NPS as a topic, myself and 2 of my colleagues, Tessa and Merlin, have written a post about this on the Mobile Growth Stack. It's quite extensive and goes into a lot of detail. So I would recommend, if you're thinking about, you know, running this kind of campaign, to have a read at that first, and you can learn about some of the mistakes that we've made along the way and things that we've learned in the process as well. Yeah, and of course we are hiring at Feature, so I just want to call out in particular for our team, we are in the process of recruiting a mid-level growth consultant and a junior growth consultant to join our team. So if you're looking for a change of scenery, or you just want a new adventure, please do reach out to us. We would absolutely love to hear from you. Great, and I think we have some time left to answer some questions. I know that there's been some questions within the chat as well. Yeah, James, I'm not sure how you want to run this. Well, I just shout them out.
Do you want to stop your screen share? Do you want to field the questions yourself, Alice, being as you've got them?
Yeah, sure.
Great.
Yeah, no problem at all. So we have the first one, is it too much to ask for NPS and App Store rating, and how do you see them sitting together? So this is a really good question. We get asked this quite a lot. With the Headspace example that we showed, what we typically kind of did there was we filtered out, so it was users that had responded, so the promoter scorers, so 9 and 10 responses, we actually, if they were on Android, sent them to the Google Play Store to give us a rating. We felt at the time that it was a bit risky to do it for iOS, because they do explicitly state in their rules and regulations that they don't want filtered reviews. So it's something that, if you were doing it with iOS, tread very carefully and make sure that you don't deploy this campaign around the time of any kind of app releases, where, you know, like Apple team might be watching that there as well. So yeah, and honestly, I think, you know, tread on the side of caution always, and you know, if you can avoid doing that, then that's what I would recommend. Yeah, would also be curious to know how other people are approaching the ratings and reviews, and you know, if it's something that you have attached to NPS or another type of survey, please do let us know. We'll just have another look to see what else has been asked. The heavy manual work involved in analysing very large quantities of qualitative data is sometimes a challenge if you want to go beyond the quantitative aspect of the score. Is that a question? Okay. Yes. So this is something that we've also kind of, you know, found to be a bit of a challenge, is especially with, you know, if you're using an open text field, you do get inundated with responses that are, you know, free form text, and it's really hard to kind of automate that process of tagging those responses by sentiment. And I think, you know, if that's something that you're concerned about, I would recommend also asking some predefined questions where, you know, obviously you know the product better than anyone, you probably know what the key areas of improvement are, and so you can sort of, you know, ask those predefined questions in tandem with this open text field. But I do also recommend, you know, don't dismiss the idea of having an open text field, because you would be surprised at the amount of times where we've received feedback from users about, for example, bugs that we've had absolutely, you know, no idea about as well. So, you know, we don't always want to kind of guide the user. We want them to really tell us what the problem is as well. In the past, so this question is from Lewis. In the past, I've entered users who complete a survey into a prize draw for an Amazon voucher. And would you recommend an approach like that? Yes, I would. I don't see a reason why not. You know, if you're struggling to get users to convert to a response, if the response rates are low, I do think having an incentive there is good. The only thing is, if you're running this through an in-app message and you've got millions of users, a bit like, you know, the tagging the responses, you want to make sure that you're not getting overwhelmed, you know, with the number of kind of competition entrants as well. So I think it's just a case of, you know, if you were going to run a giveaway, you might want to cap your responses with something like a webhook, for example, that, you know, so that if you have a webhook with a certain cap of the amount of users that are going to receive the in-app, then you can obviously stop that campaign quite quickly once you've hit that cap. But yeah, I don't see any kind of reason why not, or why that would be a bad user experience. PokerStars monitors reviews manually. We're currently trialing PN in-app campaign to prompt users to leave positive reviews based on their good experiences. That's great. That's another great initiative that you have there as well. Let us know how you get on with trialing. That would be super interested to hear all about it. And we just had another one from Andrew. How soon would you recommend an NPS survey to take place after an app launch, ensuring broader best practices when launching a new app? So are you talking about an app launch in terms of a new app altogether, or are you talking about, you know, like a new version of the app, Andrew? I would say to take place after. So I would say this kind of comes under our question, you know, or the thing that we touched on around making sure that users have actually had a chance to view the content and to use the content as well. So maybe the approach is not to think about it in terms of like how new the app is, but or the app version is, but targeting users who, as Gabriel presented earlier, who have had a chance to perform custom events X amount of times. So I think in our example, we use something like has liked content 5 or more times. You know, depending on the app though, that might actually be quite a lot and your reach might be quite low there. But you know, if it's smaller numbers and you're still kind of working on retention and things like that, even, you know, you might want to target users that have had a chance to use the kind of core features within the app maybe once or twice. So we want to make sure that, you know, we're not surveying people that don't really know what the app is all about, because that's not an accurate that's not an accurate kind of snapshot of happiness. And I think that's everything. There was a question around, Lucas was asking which colours are a no-go in which countries. So this is a good question. It's something that's kind of come up internally within Feature. We recently have been working with some of the Asian markets in particular, and there were some colours that our design team had recommended to us that we kind of avoid, because they had kind of certain like cultural kind of connotations, or they meant something that we weren't really aware of before we started working with them. So what I'll do is, Lucas, I'm actually going to follow up with our design team to get a more detailed answer in that, because I can't remember the exact ones off the top of my head, but I will get back to you, and I'll follow up on that as well, because it is something to really keep in mind. Sven's asking, is there a limit from the app stores on how often you can ask for a rating or feedback? Again, I'll need to follow up on this exact answer. I think when we ran NPS, we refresh it every 6 months. As I said, I will follow up and confirm on that one as well. And from Tom, what are your views on customer advisory boards, groups of 8 to 12 customer champions that you work with to give regular feedback? I don't Yeah, I think that that's a great idea. The only thing is that, you know, obviously if they're kind of customer champions, I would expect that that's users that are extremely familiar with the product and use the product often. And I think the point that we're trying to get across with NPS is, you know, looking at overall user happiness and, you know, trying not to kind of filter those reviews or you know, trying to step away from having any biased results. So, you know, I think definitely having people that can provide continuous feedback, that are invested in the product, as long as you know that that feedback is going to be genuine and is going to be mixed as well. So we don't always want to be getting kind of like mild to positive feedback. We want to make sure that if there are bugs or, you know, if people are not happy with new product features, that we're getting that information and that we're able to kind of act on that fast as well. All right, I think that's everything, unless someone had a last question before we move on. But yeah, I think that's everything. As I said, we will follow up on a couple of those. So there was the frequency that you can ask users for a rating, and then there was also the question about the colors and the design aspects, and I will drop those answers in this channel as well. Great, thanks everyone.